Welcome to DIELS podcast. Every episode we provide is based on in-depth analysis and independent research conducted by our team. We try to make it more professional and hope that you will find it useful and enjoy listening to it. Hello everyone, DIELS podcast with you again. I'm your moderator Sardor Allayarov, and we have an interesting topic today. We are going to discuss immigration problem in Italy. I'm here with my colleague Diellona Hyseni, and in the following minutes we are going to talk about the history of the problem and the case between Italy and migrants. Let me give a brief information about the case. The case concerned refugee issue between two states, Italy and Libya. Due to the fatal incident took place in international water of the Libyan coast in 2017, a non-governmental organization, Global Legal Action Network, and victims of the incident submitted an application to the European Court of Human Rights in collaboration with the Italian Association for Legal Studies on Immigration. They claimed against the Italian authorities in flouting their human rights obligations, namely they put the lives of migrants at risk and treating them in indecency forms. There are 130 individuals in the fatal incident. They were living in Libya on an inflated boat, and late that night requested an assistant from the Rome Maritime Rescue and Coordination Center. So, Diellona, floor is yours. Let's talk a little bit analysis part of the issue.
Well, hello Sardor, thank you for having me again. And regarding the topic you were talking about, what we have in here is that the Global Legal Action Network found the inadequate actions by the Libyan Coast Guard under the coordination of Italian authorities that they lead to the violation of human rights, and namely we are speaking here about a breach of Article 1 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is the obligation to respect human rights. Another violation of Article 2, which is the right to life, Article 3, which is prohibition of torture and inhuman or degrading treatment, and also Article 4 of Protocol number 4 to the same convention, which is prohibition of collective exclusion. However, here they found another serious issue with it, which is associated to the pullback strategies of the Italian authorities. And this is not the first case when the Italian authorities have been using these pullback strategies as a strategy to prevent the migration of refugees. However, in the other parts I will talk more about it in more details, but here I can say that another issue was also the principle of non-refoulement, which we have here another breach of this principle from the Italian authorities in this regard.
Thank you, Diellona. You stated exact issues regarding the case. If I'm not mistaken, there is a memorandum of understanding between Italy and Libya, which was signed in 2017. What do you think? Is this document consistent with the convention and international documents or not?
Well, there is this available memorandum of understanding between Italy and Libya, which was signed in 2017. However, I have to mention here that there was also another bilateral agreement in the Berlusconi time and Gaddafi when it was in power in Libya back then. However, this bilateral agreement went down because of the Hirsi and Jaume and others case, which found Italy guilty. However, no matter the fact that Italy was found guilty, a memorandum of understanding between Italy and Libya was signed in 2017. And now to answer your question if it is inconsistent with the International Convention or not on human rights, I do believe personally that it's inconsistent. In the Memorandum of Understanding, in its articles and protocols, we can find that this Memorandum of Understanding is fulfilling the obligations of protecting human rights. But in fact, what we see, how the Libyan Coast Guard treated the applicants in question under the responsibility and coordination of Italian Navy, we find out that with their support of the Italian authorities to coordinate this operation at sea. So I do totally think that this memorandum of understanding as a conclusion is inconsistent with the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, with the European Convention on Human Rights, as well as the Convention Against Torture as well.
Okay, so according to your argument, under this memorandum of understanding between these two countries, it is the responsibility of Italian government to support and prevent illegal immigration?
Yeah, definitely. It's the responsibility of the Italian government to support and coordinate this operation at sea in order to prevent this illegal migration, which in this case objectively attracts Italian responsibilities for such acts.
So here I would like to mention International Convention on Maritime Search and Rescue. We know that both Italy and Libya are the signatory member states of this convention. So what do you think under this international document, how these countries should act or perform their responsibilities in this issue? What do you think about that?
So yes, as you said, both of them are, both Italy and Libya are part of the SAR Convention, and in the case there are mentioned two articles which the court is going to take into consideration to solve this issue. Is Article 2 of International Convention on Maritime Search and Rescue, which says that the parties are required to first establish basic elements of search and rescue service. And when I'm talking about those basic elements, I mean they should first of all assign a responsible authority in the search and rescue services. There should be communication facilities and also coordination and operational functions. However, in another article of this convention, which is Article 4, we find out that a rescue coordination center is very necessary. However, the most capable person should be appointed as on-scene coordination. However, in this case, we find that Libya is incapable of being on-scene coordinator and has performed very badly, especially in the way that they treated immigrants, which I do believe that later on we will speak about this part.
Okay, thank you again, Diellona. In the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned several international principles, for example, principle of non-refoulement. Here I would like to ask two questions. The first one is principle of non-refoulement. How this principle should be applied in the case. My second question is that we know about Directive 2013/32 of the European Union, which is about rules and regulations on the issues of migration, and how this directive is consistent or relevant on this issue. What do you think about that?
Well, regarding your first question, which is the principle of non-refoulement, when we talk about this principle, of course, we are talking about the EU law, and here Italy should take into consideration this principle as an European Union member state. And what the principle of non-refoulement mentions is that no contracting state should return a refugee back to the borders of a territory where they know that their life or freedom would be threatened. And why the applicants found a breach or a violation of this principle in their case is because Italy has many times, not only in this case but in other many cases of refugees, has intercepted in the seas and have returned back refugees in Libya. And Libya, even by the UN Agency of Human Rights, even by the Commissioner of European Commission, and also the other NGOs like Sea-Watch and others, NGOs have been found as a not safe zone for refugees to be held there, and that's mostly because there are many footages which have been provided from Libya, especially Tayoura, which is a city there where there is a prison where refugees are being held and they are treated on various forms which are not socially accepted. Now, but this directive, of course, is totally not relevant because, as I said earlier, in this directive it's mentioned that a member state has legitimacy to reject an applicant if he or she finds protection in a third country. But what we have seen in the recent years in Libya is that the applicants or refugees in this case cannot find protection in any way in Libya, especially in Tayoura, where they are treated as slaves or even threatened to life in general.
Here I just remember one similar case regarding the issue. It happened in 2009, if I'm not mistaken. It is between Saudi and France. According to this case, court states that it is legitimate for contracting states to take a very firm stand against those who contributed to terrorist acts or some kind of threats to national security. In this case, they can return them to the country of departure. So, do you think that Italy can also apply this judgment to this issue?
That's great that you mentioned this case because that's this case was very famous back then in 2019 as a refugee issue between Daoudi, an applicant which was suspected for terrorist acts in France. And if we talk about our case and how the Italian authorities can use this as a pretext in this case, I think that it doesn't work in this case, because there's no sign that the migrants were going to the Italian territories for terrorist acts. Especially this can be evident, especially in the fact that they barely could save their lives. So I totally don't believe that they wanted to contribute in any terrorist acts, and I don't think that this can be used as evidence before the court from the Italian authorities in this regard.
Very excellent point, Diellona. Thank you again. As far as I know, that it is the Libyan Coast Guard who approached the boats of migrants firstly and mistreated them, disrespected their rights, and so on. But why applicants are referring that Italian authorities are guilty of these actions?
Yes, it's totally true that Russia, their ship, which was donated by Italian authorities, were the first ship to approach the applicants, and all of them who boarded on the Russia there were mistreated and even threatened with fire guns, according to the footage which is provided by the forensic architecture and also by the Sea-Watch 3 boat, which was filming all the time the process. However, regarding your question, why Italian authorities are found guilty from the applicants themselves, there are 3 reasons behind that. First of all, the first reason is of course the memorandum of understanding which was signed between them, which means that European Union is behind this, supporting financially and also giving them support, giving them not only the donation of Russia their ship, but also providing them with technical and also technological facilities. And the second reason behind that is that the Italian Navy helicopter was present and was a witness all the time during this fatal incident which was happening in the Mediterranean Sea. And all they did was just from time to time warning the Libyan Coast Guard to stop their speed and to save immigrants' lives, but that was not enough. And also, as I said, because they were somehow partly coordinating the intervention through Maritime Rescue Coordination Center, they can be found guilty from the applicants on not helping to save immigrants' life, especially when they were in the risk of not only sinking in the water, but also being threatened to death from the Libyan Coast Guard in the eyes of both the Sea-Watch crew and also the Italian authorities' ship. Also the Italian Navy helicopter.
Yes, I definitely agree with your 3 points, which are strong enough to answer these questions properly. And I would like to add something, if you don't mind. There is a flag jurisdiction rule in international law or some kind of conventions. Of course, there was a flag of Libyan Coast Guard on the ship Russia Deer, but this jurisdiction cannot be applied in this case because, as you mentioned in your previous speech, all these technological facilities are given and provided by the Italian government according to the memorandum of understanding. Okay, so let's continue with questions again. You mentioned several times, if I'm not mistaken, the case Hirsi Jama and others against Italy. In that case, third party also intervened in the case. So are there any third party interventions in this case or not?
Yes, so a joint third-party intervention has been submitted to the European Court of Human Rights, in this case in 2017, from the International Court of Justice, the Irish Centre, the European Council of Refugees and Exile, and also the Dutch Council for Refugees. They have found in this regard the Italian authorities to have jurisdictions for the purpose of convention, and therefore they had, according to them, they had to ensure that persons involved in the rescue operation would not be exposed to any serious violation of their human rights. So they are hoping that through this third-party intervention, they will help on solve this issue, which has been like almost 5 years now, and there is no result on it.
Okay, Diellona, all your arguments indicate that the violation of human rights in this case, which is not good, of course. But if we analyze the situation from a legal standpoint, the migrants of the case never entered Italian territory. So in this regard, what kind of obligations Italian government has, or they don't have any obligations?
Well, they do have. If we look and analyze this case from a legal point of view, even though the immigrants involved would never enter Italian territory, Italy still would have certain obligation towards them. In two aspects: de jure because of the Libyan agreements, which brings about that Italy can be held accountable for eventual human rights violations which were committed by the Libyan Coast Guard, and de facto because only Italy possessed the informants on migrants' vessel incidents, which selectively it passed to Libya, leaving the migrants thereby at the mercy of Libyan Coast Guard.
Okay, thank you, Diellona. It seems that you did very great analysis of the issue. So we have less time right now. Let's wrap it up. So what do you think is the end of the case, and how do you assess the importance of case in future implications? And in your opinion, how this case can affect European law or international law maybe?
Well, taking into consideration all of the facts of the cases, the footage and the evidence, what we can say is that SS and others against Italy is just another case of refugees which are drowning on the shores, which are mistreated by the authorities of their respective countries, living in inhuman conditions and are being subject to torture, slavery and other severe human rights abuses. However, on your question if about the verdict of how can the verdict of this case end, is that it is quite impossible to predict what this case could bring in the future. However, I can suppose that there are two possible scenarios of the case. In the worst case scenario, influenced by political pressure, the court may turn a blind eye this time in condemning any withdrawal practices, especially the pushback policies which were used by Italian authorities, and major violations of several fundamental human rights. However, I truly believe that such a case will have a favorable impact on future instances. I think that a favorable verdict for refugee would bring not only justice for them, but also punishment of the policies which we have talked during this podcast, particularly those in Italy that violate basic human rights. On your last question about the case and its indication on the European policies, I do believe that this will be a turning point for the EU policies if the verdict will be in favor for refugees, because it will not only establish that pullback policies are cruel and they are violating human rights, but also it will make Italian authorities, and not Italian authorities, but also other EU member states, to find out practical ways to prevent huge influxes of migrants without involving violation or without returning them to countries which put their lives at risk. So I do believe that, unaffected by the political circumstances, a positive decision would put also an end to a memorandum that, while preventing migration flow, it has violated human rights and freedoms.
So, in short, you mean that the court will find Italian government be guilty of the incident?
Yes, I would totally like to say that the court will take into consideration all the claims of the opposing party provided with evidence and find Italian authorities to be guilty for this incident.
Wow, great, very exciting. I would like to add something about the significance of the case. Of course, it may be remarkable in terms of future ramifications, for example, with a significant influence on the management of border crossings between nations, particularly control at the sea. So, thank you, Diellona. As always, you delivered a brilliant analysis of the issue. Thank you very much for being with me in this podcast, and I would like to also thank for the audience listening to our podcast with patience. And at the end of the podcast, I want to say that don't forget to subscribe and like our channel, and stay tuned and wait for our third episode, which is coming soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.